Okay, so quickly, let's move on to the next segment now. The next gentleman here with us, we're going to be having Sean Norris, Field CIO, APJ, Pivotal. A quick introduction about the gentleman. He serves as the Asia Pacific and Japan Field CIO, where he helps organizations across the region align and shape their business strategy with a path to connecting that strategy to technology execution. He brings specific expertise in running large-scale mission-critical applications in production. In addition, he is deeply experienced in how development and operations can work together to improve software delivery performance. The topic he will be educating us about is on reduce operations, toil with platform as a service. Let's give it up, ladies and gentlemen, and let's welcome Sean here on stage.
Can you hear me okay? Just do a quick sound check. I have the same display issue that Rosalind was having, so bear with me for 1 second. We're doing a very quick changeover here. All right, I think we are ready to go. And we've started the timer, so thanks very much. My name is Sean Norris. I am the field CIO for Pivotal. So I spend a lot of my time with customers in the Asia-Pacific region. And I've been in the technology industry almost 25 years and worked for a few of these companies that you see up here on the board. Notably, Amazon Web Services. I spent about 4 years at Amazon Web Services. The last 4 years or so have been with JP Morgan Chase and Standard Chartered Bank. And prior to that, I spent some time with some startups like lastminute.com as well as VeriSign, a security company. I started my career in Canada with EDS back in the 90s. And that was the last time I had anything to do with mainframes. So I found that previous presentation really interesting. On Twitter, I'm at Sean Norris. If you're on Twitter, please join in the conversation. If you're not, and you're in technology, then I would suggest you join. This is one of my favorite quotations, that if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. I like this quotation for 2 reasons. The first is the metaphorical, that even though this was said over 100 years ago, even back then, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who said this, realized that command and control management and leadership wasn't a great plan. It's never been a great plan. No one's ever liked working under command and control. It's just we're more explicit about it now. Now, the second, much more personal reason is that I'm a sailor. This is actually my boat on the screen. And so most weekends in Singapore, you'll find me doing this. And any chance to get a cheeky sailing slide up during a presentation, and I will take it. So I like this one, but let's move on. And before we get into reducing toil, I want to talk about what has been almost an infection in our industry for really at least 15 years. Now, this is Harvard Business Review from 2003, and it's really small. I wonder if I can actually zoom in on my machine here. Yeah, I can. Look at this. Do you see this here? IT Doesn't Matter by Nicholas Carr on page 41. And look at the things it suggests. This was the summary of the article, that as a CIO or a technology leader, you should spend less, and you should rigorously evaluate the returns from IT investments, that you should follow, not lead. The longer you wait to make an IT purchase, the better off you'll be, the more you'll get for your money. And you should let impatient rivals shoulder the high cost of experimentation, and you should focus on vulnerabilities, not opportunities. Now, the punchline of this was that IT is just a commodity. In 2003, Nicholas Carr was suggesting that IT was really like electricity or water, things that you needed to run your business, but that didn't differentiate you in any way. And the interesting thing is 15 years later, we're sitting at a DevOps conference talking about how we can innovate and how we can be more productive and how we can do digital transformations. So it's a really interesting flashback. If you wonder why your great new technology ideas don't immediately get approved, it's because this thinking has pervaded the business landscape for at least 15 years. And it's starting to change slowly, but I spend a lot of my time with business leaders and people making business decisions, not just technology ones. And so it's really interesting to step back from the nuts and bolts of technology and look at what is kind of the underlying operating system or mindset of business leaders, and this thinking is still pervasive. Now, very quickly changing gears, one of the things we do at Pivotal, our mission is to transform how the world builds software. And one of the ways we do that is we invite companies in to come work with us in our offices, and they learn things like how to do test-driven development better, and how to do pair programming, and how to set up continuous integration and continuous deployment, and how to foster a psychological safety culture where teams can be more productive and deliver faster and better. And so DBS in Singapore, I'm sure folks have heard of DBS. Apologies for the screen dropping in and out, but we'll continue anyways. DBS in Singapore has been working with Pivotal, and over the past couple years, the team we've been working with has actually improved their release cadence 10x. It's 6 times easier to deploy, and self-service is now just normal for developers in this team. So the second half of this presentation is going to be a very quick experience report of some of the specifics around DBS and how they've adopted some of these new ways of working to help them be more productive. Before, though, this will be the most important research you'll read this year, I think, if you haven't read it yet. Quick show of hands, how many people have read the Accelerate book? Okay. So this is good. They've had 6 years of this research, and they've had over 31,000 participants. There were around 1,000 participants in the 2019 version, which just came out about 10 days ago, and really broad industry coverage. Technology and financial services are the top 2. Nicole Forsgren, she has a doctorate in management information systems, one of the smartest people in technology, and she has spearheaded this research around how teams can deliver better. And I'm going to give you the 30-second version of this, which is that there are 4 metrics that matter if you're measuring how your technology team performs. And they're based on throughput and stability. And quickly, it's how often are you deploying? How long is the lead time for those deployments? Those are your throughput metrics. And then as you deploy or make changes to an environment, how often does it fail? And in the hopefully rare case that it does fail, how often do you recover? And so the punchline to this research, and when you're making executive presentations, this is one thing you can take back. Don't wait till the very end to make your point and your punchline. The whole point to this book and this research is that by adopting DevOps principles and practices, you can have better software delivery and operational performance and have better business performance or better business outcomes. So now this goes from being something that excites technologists like I'm guessing most of us in the room and me, and something that actually will start to excite business leaders who are less technical and still view technologists as a bit scary and they're not quite sure what we do when we lock ourselves in our agile workspaces. Now, you should go download this report if you haven't. This is the latest State of DevOps report. It's a free download. If you just Google 2019 State of DevOps, you'll find a link. I think you have to put your email address in. You can download it. It's about 60 pages. The interesting summary, you can see here how performance of industry and companies who have responded has changed from 2018 to 2019. And again, all of the credit for this I'm taking directly out of the report. This is not my work. This is the State of DevOps team led by Dr. Nicole Forsgren. And when they ask folks to self-rate on these 4 metrics, they then cluster them into elite, high, medium, and low performers. And we can see the number of elite performers year on year is actually going up. And so this is suggesting that there is a move towards better software delivery performance that's happening in the industry. But I want to quickly give you a couple examples. It's one thing to talk about theory and practical things, but and non-practical things, but I want to give you a couple specific examples of both the good and the bad in terms of what software delivery performance looks like. So the first one is from Tesla. Everyone's heard of Tesla, I'm sure. Now, this was earlier this year. If you look at the timestamp here, let's try my zoom in trick again here. You see this August 1st at 7:59 a.m. And a user of a Tesla tweeted to Elon Musk and said, dog mode's not working in my car. Now, dog mode is an interesting one. Tesla has this feature where if you have a pet that you need to leave in the car while you do some shopping, you can set dog mode and it keeps the aircon on so the dog doesn't get hot and it keeps a nice even temperature inside the car. Well, the customer tweeted Elon Musk. He said, okay, we should fix it. Fixing ... very shortly after the tweet. And you can see that by 10:43 p.m. on August 2nd, the customer is showing a screenshot of the updated fix already rolled out to his car. Okay? You might think, okay, well, that's just a bug fix. How hard can that really be? It was urgent, they needed to fix it. So let's show another quick one. This one was in 2016. So this shows that Tesla's been doing this for some time. Loic Lemire tweeted Elon Musk and said, the San Mateo supercharger is always full with people who leave their Teslas for hours, even if already charged. You can see that was on December 11th at 8:30. 20 minutes later, Elon Musk said, you're right, this is becoming an issue. Supercharger spots are meant for charging, not parking. We'll take action. And you can see then, if we zoom in here, it was 1 week later. Tesla rolls out improved supercharger availability. If all the spots were full and you were at 100%, they started charging you 40 cents a minute for keeping your car there at 100% charge. So you think of the things that were required for Tesla to roll that out in 1 week. They had to figure out what the requirements were. They had to update their mobile app. They had to update every Tesla on the planet with new firmware. They had to have mobile payment gateway integrations because they're taking money from you. And they had to do all of their testing, all of their acceptance testing, and they had to roll it out in 1 week. So when I meet CIOs or senior business leaders, I like to ask them, and I don't really expect a response, but I like to ask a sort of probing, challenging question that if your board or your CEO came to you today and told you or your team or your leadership, we have this billion-dollar idea, but we need to implement it as soon as humanly possible, how fast could your team execute it? And in the organizations I've been part of recently, we would have been lucky to do it in 6 months and probably 9 to 12. And that's the normal state of play in large enterprises today. Even though DevOps as a thing is like 10 years old, it's still early in the adoption cycle. So the other side is equally interesting. So we've looked at the heights, the real best-in-class world performers, people like Tesla. What about people like Knight Capital? How many people have heard of Knight Capital? Well, they don't really exist anymore, so I'm not hugely surprised. Okay, you'll look here and see that August 1st, they had a bit of a problem. They were a high-frequency trading company in New York, and due to a regulatory change and some changes to the way the stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange was working, they pushed a code update to production. The result of that code update, and you can go read it, it's a really interesting postmortem, but the result was that they lost $440 million in 30 minutes and promptly went out of business permanently. Okay, so that's like every engineer's worst nightmare. If you think you've had a bad day, you probably haven't lost $440 million in 30 minutes. So this is why we kind of heard Topo Pal this morning talking about how not all industries are created equal. Like social media posts are not like banking transactions. You need to be more careful when you're pushing things in a heavily regulated financial services industry, for example, than if you're building the next Twitter. I spent some time at Amazon, and I want to quickly share a couple stories about Amazon. Also in the idea that this culture of continuous improvement is something that the best companies in the world are adopting. Now, Gary Groover and I have been sharing a few coffees here at this conference, and we've been talking around this idea that one of the things I see a lot when I go into companies, and some of the companies I've been at most recently, is that senior executives are very disconnected from the work. And yet you go to a place like Amazon, and they have a culture of Gemba. My Japanese colleagues corrected me that apparently Gemba is the appropriate way or the correct way to pronounce this. And it basically, as I understand it, means walking around and inspecting work. In the Toyota production system, the urban legend is that managers were told that they should be so involved in the actual production that they should have to wash their hands 3 or 4 times a day. And so Gemba is the idea that you should be walking around inspecting work. You should actually understand how work gets done, a la making work visible by people like Dominica de Grandis. And Kaizen is a word that if you go ask almost anyone who works at Amazon, they'll be able to tell you what that Japanese word means, that it's this DNA of continuous improvement, but not command and control from the top. This is associate level upwards of getting together to figure out how to solve problems together. So the upshot of the State of DevOps report is that the best companies in the world are deploying 200 times more often. They're 100 times faster lead time. They recover from failure thousands of times faster, and they have about 7 times lower change failure rate. If you don't believe me, go read the Accelerate book, and they go into excruciating detail on the statistical relevance and validity of their methods. It's a very impressive piece of work. So why does it matter to really every business, though? Because it's interesting from a technology point of view. We all want to work better and work with the best tools. But why would business CEOs, COOs, non-technical people, if you like, care about this? Well, it's that the highest performers are twice as likely to meet or exceed their organizational performance goals. This is not your technology goals. This is your business making more money. So remember the thing we had up earlier? Adopt DevOps practices and principles, get better at software delivery, help your business make more money. So that's the hypothesis or the conclusion, if you like, of this research. I encourage, if you haven't read it, have a look. So let's jump quickly and talk about operations. I came up as an operations guy. I started off with Novell servers, moved to Microsoft and then Linux, and as I worked in bigger enterprises, I was always on the ops side of DevOps. Now, if I was to criticize the DevOps community a little bit, and it would just be a minor criticism, that it's been very dev-centric. And so one of the things I wanted to do today, and hence reducing ops toil, is talk about some of the ways that the key themes out of this Accelerate research can actually be helpful to ops specifically. There's lots of things that are helpful to dev, but that's not really where I want to focus today. And so 3 of them are cloud computing, platforms as services, and infrastructure as code. We're going to go really quickly because my timer is zooming past. And cloud computing. This is one of those words that means everything to anybody. And so in this research, they took the NIST definition, which had 5 specific things. I think the most interesting ones is that it should be multi-tenant resource pooled. It should be self-service provisioned. Your developers should be able to get infrastructure self-service without tickets, without delay. If you're looking for easy ways to start, that would be one of the things I suggest. And then effective resource metering. You should be able to give your developers and business a bill of exactly what your infrastructure services cost. If you have a cloud of any kind and it can't do those things, you can call it a cloud, but it's not meeting these definitions. And elite performers were 24 times more likely to have met all 5 of these conditions than low performers. In terms of cloud, it's interesting that 44% of respondents in this survey were still using no cloud. And they also note that many of our survey respondents who claim to be using cloud haven't adopted the essential patterns that matter. Now, if you've had the privilege of watching Cornelia Davis speak, she's one of our senior VPs at Pivotal. She speaks at a number of DevOps conferences and other industry conferences. One of my favorite lines of hers is that everyone speaks about where you're doing cloud, but how you're doing cloud is actually much more important. So the how of cloud is more important than where. And so as we get to that, I want to quickly go through some cloud anti-patterns that I've seen. If you're doing lift and shift to the cloud of just IaaS, and you're not thinking about cloud native architecture, that might be an anti-pattern. If you have 37 of your microservices, but they're all sharing a single database, that might be a cloud anti-pattern. If you have 100 separate microservices, but they all share a single API gateway, again, you see where I'm going with this. And cloud abstraction layers. This is one of the ones that I often come across people, and they say, well, we don't need to buy a platform. We don't need to invest anything there. We got smart engineers, we'll build it ourselves. The trouble is people vastly underestimate the amount of money, time, effort it takes to build a cloud abstraction product and then run it for the next 5 to as many years as you're going to run it. I've seen a number of efforts at this. I'm yet to see a successful one as an internal effort from a non-cloud company. And as an interesting one, we're all in on Kubernetes. Kubernetes is fantastic technology. It is the next big thing. It is the next IaaS, in my opinion. But it is not a platform that will solve all your problems. So infrastructure as code is the next topic. And teams using infrastructure as code were almost twice as likely to be elite performers. And platform as a service. If you're using an abstraction so developers can just push their code and not have to worry about where it's running and take care of a number of common things, then you were about 1.5 times more likely to be an elite performer in last year's survey. And what is a platform? Really quickly, one of the things I got as feedback talking to people like Damon Edwards on this talk is, I don't want this to be a Pivotal Cloud Foundry sales pitch. So I've specifically not kind of gone there and done a features and benefits thing on Cloud Foundry, because that's not the point of where we're going here. But if you have a platform that's going to abstract things for developers, it should be able to do things like log aggregation, monitoring, and patching. And the nice thing about that is it lets you run it with a platform team. And so now your development teams just have one team to go to, rather than 13 or 14 different teams who are looking after each layer cake in the infrastructure stack. And we're going to cover that a little bit more. And again, we seem to be having some AV issues, but hopefully we're not putting anyone off too much. Let's talk a little bit about the specific examples at DBS. Platform, when they've adopted a platform versus doing what they were doing before. So with their legacy applications on VMs, they needed to coordinate, have downtime. It took them lots of planning and paperwork. Now, with the cloud abstraction platform they're using, they don't really need to be involved at all, and they do rolling upgrades during the business day for about 3,000 JVMs. Deployments now take place at 2 p.m. every day, including Fridays, and deployments now only happen after hours when they have to integrate with legacy applications. And the sort of results they're getting, well, when Java 11 came out, they had it in production within 2 months. When Spring Boot 2.0 came out, they were in production within 2 weeks. And Dapeng, who leads the credit risk development team, who I work with quite closely, says this is only possible when you have a microservices approach and an automated platform. And so the stuff they've done around pipeline automation is really interesting as well. So it used to be that every new service, you'd have to set up a pipeline manually. And they have a bunch of build tools, and it almost doesn't matter what those are, but they had to go in and manually do all the plumbing and wiring for every new service. So now they go to one form, they fill in the name of the Git repo, and where they want to deploy, which is their platform, and the pipeline gets auto-generated, and so there's no more manually building of Jenkins files. And what was happening before is that they were releasing microservices, but each one had up to 100 controllers in it, and so it was more of a macro service. It was kind of like a monolith in microservice clothing. And this was because pipelines took so long to set up that it wasn't worthwhile setting one up for what should have been a proper domain-separated microservice. And so the moral of the story is if you continue to have low-level friction, like setting up pipelines is difficult or getting infrastructure is difficult, the resulting impact on your higher-level architecture may not be what you want. And incident management. Platforms really help with this. This is one that's near and dear to me, having run large-scale, web-scale applications in production for quite some time. They ran into a system that was a reporting system internally. It had a badly written database query. This probably sounds familiar to anybody who spent any time in operations. And this app ended up crashing 5 to 10 times in a day. And because it was on the platform and running in containers, the platform would automatically restart it within a couple seconds. And so these crashes, instead of being catastrophic, were largely invisible to users. And this bought the team enough time to roll out a release fix. So even for a legacy application that wasn't cloud native, they were getting benefits by having it be on a container platform. And so the team told me that they don't really roll back anymore. They only roll forward with fixes in the event of bug fixes. And previously, this would have caused a significant amount of downtime and pain and having to go sit in meetings with the business and explain why critical services weren't available. So the other thing that's really interesting, back to the very first slide I put up about command and control doesn't work anymore. We're trying to make a better work environment for folks working in technology, is that they're finding they're able to work at a more sustainable pace. So it's no longer normal to work overtime and do Saturday deployments in this team. And what they told me is if you look after people well, they will look after your applications well. And so they actually go around, and anytime they see people hanging around the office after 6:30, they encourage them to go home. And they actually now have an official policy that if you have to work a half a day out of hours, you get twice that time off during business hours. And when they started this journey a couple years ago, their engagement score with employees was much lower than the technology team averages. And yet, by implementing these DevOps tools and approaches, they've improved this to a score that's well above the overall technology team average. And this really corresponds to them adopting these new ways of working and having a sustainable pace for the teams. They also do things like lunch and learn sessions, and they find the team is much more engaged and cohesion is much higher than it was 2 years ago. Now, they haven't eliminated all legacy processes. One of the things they still have to deal with in this team is change releases. And so they weren't able to just bypass and push things without change releases. But what they found is it took so long to manually fill in the forms and produce the Excel spreadsheets, and then they would get it wrong and it would get sent back and closed. And so they wrote some software to actually produce the Excel spreadsheets automatically. So this is, I think, a great example of pragmatism where they've been able to move the needle forward on making things better, but they haven't got all the way there yet. And so they're still strictly following the bank processes, but they now get it right on their change requests much more often the first time because they've essentially automated the production of these. So that brings me, and I put this in this morning from after Topol Pal's talk, around like what kind of comes first? Is it tools or is it culture? And I think it's a bit of both, and it depends on the situation. That you can't just talk about culture and expect people to use old crappy tools. But you also can't have a culture of no psychological safety and then give people a bunch of new tools and expect things magically to change. This is a situation that requires really good leadership. And the thing to take away from this as motivation is that elite performers are almost twice as likely to recommend their team as a great place to work from the State of DevOps and Accelerate report. And so I want to leave you with this, which is that over on the right here, you've got the typical infrastructure stacks. Now, we talked about how platforms as service can obfuscate a lot of that and abstract it away so it's not a problem anymore. But you also have this horizontal concern of development pipelines. And yet, one of the people I work with, James Waters, who's our SVP of strategy at Pivotal, he likes to talk about this value line. Because if you see the customers up here in the right corner, your customers don't care about what color the cables are in your data center. Your customers don't care what version control you're using. Your customers don't care what cache you're using, et cetera, for all of this. However, there's an important nuance there that they expect you to get it all right. You know, for example, if you're with a financial services institution, a customer's not going to come to you because of the way you patch your servers, but they will leave you if you do it badly and you have a big data breach or you have, you know, some sort of security incident and they lose trust in you. So this is a great model. I think it's our kind of take on wordly mapping. If you're familiar with wordly mapping, this is like a wordly map turned on its side. And the further down you go is really commodity. And up at the top is where you want to be focusing your effort. And yet most enterprises I talk to are spending 80% of their time still wrangling things that are well down below the value line, that if you went out and asked your customers, they wouldn't really care. My time is almost up. I want to finish off by suggesting that you go read the Unicorn Project as soon as it's out. It's out on November 19th. I was lucky enough to be one of the advanced reviewers, and so I read an early draft of it on the plane on the way here, and I think it's actually even better than the Phoenix Project, which was considered the DevOps Bible from Gene Kim. So I'm really excited about this coming out. It's going to focus more on the development community. It's going to focus more on what we see in that. I will let the Christmas music finish, and I am finished as well. Let me just close by saying that I've also got a DevOps reading list. I would love you to join the conversation on Twitter. My details are there. And thank you so much to Excellentro and the organizers for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Well, we request you to kindly ask 2 questions as we have 2 goodies to be given off. Any 2 questions from the presentation, what you did?
Okay, first question, what is the name of Gene Kim's new book?
Yes, he was quick. Yes, tell us.
Good stuff.
Congratulations. Please join us on stage for your goodie. Walk up.
And how many key metrics are there in the State of DevOps report?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. I'll let you decide who is first.
Yeah.
What are we giving away?
Yeah, those are the 2 gifts. Yeah.
All right.
1-1. Yeah.
I will let you gentlemen fight over.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Let's give it up, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.